Welcome back to CBS News Detroit at 4. Students in the Detroit Public Schools Community District are back in the classroom for a new school year. Joining us now is Superintendent Nikolai Vitti to talk about plans for the academic year and his message for students. Thanks so much for taking time out.
Thank you.
On a season opener day to be with us.
Yes.
Loving the blue. All right, let's talk academics here. The M-STEP standardized tests, we've seen improvements. How does that make you feel after knowing just a year ago the big focus was recovering from the pandemic?
Well, it makes DPSCD feel great. I mean, I think we were one of the few districts last year to stop making excuses about student achievement based on the pandemic and really focus on getting back to the reform and focusing on teaching and learning and what's happening in the classroom. Our principals, our teachers all stepped up, our support staff, our students, and our families, and it's just great, especially in literacy, to know that we're beyond pre-pandemic levels with literacy and showed strong improvement in math and great improvement on the SAT. So the district is really back to our reform work and just not weighed down by the realities of the pandemic anymore.
A relief for you and a relief for the parents. It's my understanding the district has run out of that federal COVID relief funding. With that being said, will we see some of those programs that the funding paid for continue, or now do things have to change?
Yeah, well, things have to change. So we balanced our budget going in this year without having those dollars. And about half of the money has been put in facilities. So we have about $2 billion of needs throughout the district. About $700 million is put aside for projects over the next 5 years on putting air conditioning in all of our buildings, building some new buildings at schools like Cody, Pershing, and some of the programs that you named are continuing next year, like mental health in all of our schools, having a nurse in every one of our buildings. So we had to make some hard decisions on this year's budget, but those decisions were made based on student achievement and focusing on students. And our budget is balanced. I'm not worried about not having the money, and I believe that we're going to have another year of raising student achievement despite not having those funds.
So I jotted this one down because I didn't want to forget to ask you. Lawmakers recently passed an education budget to make breakfast and lunch free for public students. Your district, though, has been offering this for several years, correct?
Right.
So what do you think other districts can learn from your experience? Where is this headed, in your opinion?
I think it's the right direction. I commend the governor and the legislature for doing that. As you mentioned, the federal government allowed us to give all students access to free and reduced lunch because we had such concentrated poverty in the district. And I think it's just a win-win for families and students. I think having insecurity to food is something that we don't talk a lot about as society, and a lot of our families are impacted by that. And if you come to school hungry or you don't have an opportunity to eat lunch, it's definitely going to affect your focus, whether behaviorally or academically. So it's just one more obstacle that I think schools can overcome by providing free and reduced lunch to all kids. And it reduces some of the stigma that comes along with filling out that form and knowing that your family might be facing some hard times.
Absolutely. Something we've talked about quite a bit this week, at the beginning of the week, how hot it was. Certainly not the norm, but it happens. What is that obstacle? And do you feel like there should be more capital investments for AC in schools?
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine it really interrupts learning.
Yeah, it does. For us in DPSCD, our average building is 60 years old. So you can imagine when those buildings were built, we didn't really have the kind of infrastructure and funding to incorporate air conditioning. And so right now, only about 20% of our schools of about 100 have air conditioning. With the funding that we talked about earlier, that COVID relief funding, all of our schools but 12 will have air conditioning in the next 5 to 7 years. So we're excited about that. But in the meantime,
and if you don't mind me, how many buildings are there?
About 100.
Okay.
Yeah, so about 20.
12. Okay.
Yeah, about 20 right now, and then over the next 5 to 7 years, we're putting anywhere from $20 to $40 million into HVAC systems. So we'll be in a place in the next 5 to 7 years to hopefully not have half days when it gets warm. But it's a decision. It's a hard decision, but I think it's necessary. I was able to visit some schools the past 2 days, and once you go on that second floor, it can be over 90 degrees in some of those classrooms, and it's just intolerable for teachers and students, and you lose focus, and then you're not able to focus on what matters, which is teaching and learning. And so half days are better than no days, meaning to call off the day altogether. It keeps teaching and learning in some kind of rhythm and consistency. But luckily, the forecast calls for some colder weather, so I don't think it'll be a problem for the rest of September.
Double check with that guy during commercial break.
I'm not trying to do someone else's job, but,
No.
but I do have to look at it as superintendent.
No, I believe you. Before we run out of time with you, and I know you're facing staffing shortages. With that being said, though, any new or ongoing initiatives that, despite this problem we're seeing across the country, you're dedicated to tackling?
Yeah, we're DPSCD. You know, when we started this reform work about 6-7 years ago, we had 400, 500 teacher vacancies. We start this school year with only 50.
Wow.
And really, there's two main reasons why that is. One, we've dramatically increased teacher salaries by almost $20,000 on average. We're one of the most competitive school districts when it comes to beginning teacher salaries, and we're growing our own teachers within the school district. So we have a On the Rise program where we work with individuals that are already working with our students in small groups called academic interventionists. They have college degrees but not certification, so they learn how to teach in our classrooms with our kids. So we're developing our own bench of future teachers in Detroit, so we don't have to rely on universities and people to change professions. So it's really, I think, the way of the future in anticipating the challenges of recruiting and staffing teachers.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Sounds like you're starting the school year off strong.
Yes, we're excited.
Superintendent Nikolai Vitti with us. We appreciate your time
Thank
this
you.
afternoon.
Go Lions.
Thank you. Yes. I got to squeeze that in there.